Thanks for joining us today for how to replace Management Reporter, FRX, and Forecaster with a single application. My name is Noah Moseley. I'll be co-presenting today along with Nick Sercer. Nick and I are both with MSX Group, which specializes in financial reporting, budgeting, and analysis solutions. All of us at the MSX Group have over 20 years of experience handling the different applications for these financial reporting and budgeting solutions. Between our time at MSX Group and before that Microsoft and FRX and Great Plains. Let's start off with discussing the problem that we're currently facing for financial reporting and budgeting. Microsoft has discontinued development for these products. Management Reporter, FRX, and Forecaster will no longer have any development dedicated to them. Now they are currently under support by Microsoft, but eventually that will be going away as well. So that was a huge problem that was announced years ago. We still have many more years to go before support goes away, but we see that coming already. So as a solution for this problem, we have come up with Prospero for replacing these products and handling financial reporting, budgeting, and analysis for us. Now, when we look back through our development process, we looked at all these products for financial reporting and budgeting, Management Reporter, FRX, and Forecaster, and we wanted to go through and pull about, improve upon these challenges that face us with the other products. So in Prospero, we put everything into a single application. Just by doing that was a huge improvement between handling security. Now we have one centralized location for handling all of your financial reporting security as well as your budgeting security, as well as greater options for the security roles inside Prospero. We have set up some things inside line set maintenance, which helps reduce maintenance for our reports and for our budget input screens. We actually just took some features from Forecaster that we preferred over the features inside Management Reporter and FRX, where we could have a summary row automatically expand and show us all the individual accounts that are included in that summary range. So it's a great way so that we don't have to go back and update our line sets for our reports or input screens. They automatically expand to catch any new accounts that are added for us. Report output. Management Reporter was limited to just viewer output for every report that you generated from Management Reporter. We wanted to change that back to how FRX would allow you to generate reports directly to the viewer as well as directly to Excel, PDF documents, or even to the printer. We've added graphing inside Prospero. Management Reporter and FRX had some limited graphing options. Forecaster had no graphing options for us. We have added graphing features inside Prospero as a built-in for any report that we generate inside Prospero. And it's not just static graphing. These are dynamic charts and graphs which you can actually drill down to lower levels of detail and change the drill down order as you're drilling down through those graphs. And the same thing about changing the drill down order for the charts and graphs applies for our numeric reports as well. We added a option where for the report library, instead of having a library of every report you ever generate from your financial statements, we have a published reports option. So in Management Reporter, every time you ran a report, it would be saved in the SQL database. But if you run an income statement 50 times in 1 month, you might not necessarily need all 50 copies. So we've taken it and set up Prospero so that you can only save the actual copies that you do want to keep in our published reports section. There's tons of other things that we've gone through and help you overcome challenges from Management Reporter, FX, and Forecasters. We built Prospero. We'll look at those as we go through the demo today. Price was a big one there at the bottom there. I want to mention that when you are looking at other options for transitioning from these legacy systems to a new financial reporting and budgeting solution, look at the pricing. Prospero has a great advantage over a lot of the competition out there. So be glad to share that with you as we go forward. Let's start off with just a high-level discussion about what Prospero does for us. Prospero is our all-in-one software solution for financial reporting, budgeting, forecasting, and analysis. We built this in-house with our own development team, so we did not outsource it. And this is a purpose-built application for accountants by accountants. Now, for the two functionalities that we want to discuss, reporting and budgeting, let's talk about the big picture for reporting first. When you're working with Prospero for reporting, you'll use this application for building all of your financial statements, your income statements, your balance sheet statements, your cash flow statements, trial balance statements, and any other kind of supporting schedule that you want to build inside Prospero. And all of these reports, and when you generate them, we also include account and transaction level details, so you can drill down to those levels and see exactly where all the balances are posted to all the different accounts and dimensions and segments, and the transactions as well. Plus, we also have built-in dynamic charts and graphs, so you can drill down to all those details, change the drill down order, and get to the details through the visual options for us. Now, for budgeting inside Prospero, these are spreadsheet style user input screens. So if you're currently using Excel for budgeting or Forecaster for budgeting, it's a very easy transition from those systems to Prospero. Rows and columns, easy input for your budget managers. We also have detail input screen options built into Prospero for handling human resource budgeting and capital budgeting. We've got options for line item details. We'll look at that for the input screens for Prospero. That lets your budget managers add additional rows of details to their input screens without having to ask for the budget administrator to add those. They can add them themselves. They can add notes to any rows here in their input screens. And as soon as they click the Save button on their input screens, all the balances are automatically consolidated and available for reporting. Now, if you are currently using Management Reporter or FRX or Forecaster, I want to mention some migration options for you. We do have that set up so that we can help you copy your report definitions from Management Reporter over to Prospero, your report definitions from FRX over to Prospero, and your budget setup from Forecaster over to Prospero. It's a great way to save time and money so that you don't have to start from scratch when you're moving from these legacy products over to Prospero. So I'm going to start off with a high-level overview of the application with you, mainly about navigation, but before I turn this over to Nick. So let me switch screens here with us. And I've got on my screen Prospero already open. I've got on the right-hand side the large colorful boxes here for our quick launch window. A little bit more about that in a minute. On the left-hand side, I've got our main navigation panel. Now, if you're a budget administrator, you'll be using this all the time. On the left-hand side, I've got buttons for everything we need to handle for setting up our reports inside Prospero, our budget input screens, all of our security, and everything else that we need in a single application. So if I click on reports at the bottom left here at the top, I'll see all the report definitions we've got set up inside Prospero, all of your balance sheet statements, cash flow statements, your charts and graphs, your income statements, any other reports that you want to set up are all listed here. Now, when you're setting up your reports inside Prospero, every report definition is going to be built using a line set and a column set. So I've got two buttons at the bottom left for those two, lines and columns. Clicking on one time on those will show all those above here. The lines will tell us what every row in the body of the report represents. The columns will tell us what every column of the report represents. Also, the lines and columns that we use for reporting can be the same lines and columns that we use for our input screens for budget. So a great way to help the administrator when you're building your reports and you're building your input screens for budget, you can share those so you don't have to duplicate the process. You can use one column set for both of those reports and input screens, same columns, same lines, really helps to reduce maintenance when you're building those. Another building block that we use inside Prospero would be our trees. Now, the trees are very similar to how we have the trees inside Microsoft Forecaster. They are a lot different than how we have the trees inside FRX or Management Reporter. So I want to show those to you so that you can get a feel for those. because we have a lot of people who have never used Forecaster. I want to show you how these look so that you'll have a transition from Management Reporter and FRX as well. So if I go to trees at the top here, I'll expand that current. And I've got options for company, natural, location, and department. Those are your chart of accounts for this company. If you have 5 segments or 5 dimensions, they'd all be listed here. And underneath each one of these, we have all the trees that help summarize these dimension IDs or segment IDs. So if I go under department, I've got only one that says all departments. I'll just double click to show you that on the right here. And this is a built-in summary of any department that Prospero finds for this company. We can report on any of these here, use these for budgeting as well. The great thing about the all departments roll-up tree here is that if you ever add a new department, it automatically gets added to this list. So you don't have to come back here and do any maintenance. The all option automatically picks up any new additions here. And that's true for all departments, all locations, all companies, all naturals. So great way to make sure that you actually pick up any new IDs here. Now for location, I do have the all locations option, but I have, in addition to that, jump back to trees here and look under location. I've also got trees for organizing by division and by region. So if I double click the total company by region for all my locations, I can see that I've organized this into an East region, South, West, and Midwest. And underneath each of these, I can right click and expand all. Whoops, sorry. Right click and expand all there. I can see that I've got individual locations adding up to the summaries here. And I can see at the very bottom, I've got the Midwest using a wildcard and asterisk. I want to point out that when you're building all these trees for any of these dimensions or natural account numbers, you can add them individually. And if you can also add these with the wildcards or ranges, which makes it even better, so that this one for Midwest would pick up any new additions that started with a 4 for location. Now we'll use these summaries for any of our reports, any of our input screen definitions, and we can reference these also in any line set and any column set as well. And when you get ready to run a report, you can also pick those from the prompts, so you can run the reports for any part of these trees. Let me also show you the natural tree here. I've got one for net income. I'll open that up for us on the right. And under here, just to show you, I'll use total expenses as an option here. If I reference total expenses on a report, I can see that this is a range of account numbers, and this would automatically pick up any new expense account that I ever add to this company. I can reference total expenses in my line set, and I can have it automatically expand and display all the accounts that make up that total. So in my line set, I don't have to hard code all that list of accounts like I would inside FRX or Management Reporter. I'll have this set up right here in the tree, and I'll tell this row to automatically expand and pick up any of those accounts in that range. So a great way to reduce maintenance in Prospero. Some of the other buttons I have on the left-hand side here for us, publish reports. Just want to mention that this is where we actually save any reports that we want to keep a static copy. So you may run an income statement 50 times every month. You don't want to necessarily keep all 50 copies of that income statement. You just want to publish or save that last income statement that you know everything is posted, all the balances are correct. So you have the option to run reports and actually publish that last good copy. And we set up, you can set up any folders you want to organize those reports inside Prospero, and then have those published and saved so you know what you handed out on that date. We have buttons at the bottom also for security. Security is handling access to all the reports inside Prospero, as well as all the input screens for budget, forecast, or planning. We also control in security the user's access to any of your different companies or dimensions like departments or cost centers or locations. So all that security is handled right here in one application for all the reports and all the budgets. Segments inside Prospero. Typically, if you are using the report integration for Prospero, the segments are automatically populated from your general ledger chart of accounts. I can see I'm using company, natural, location, and department here. All these would have been automatically copied from our general ledger system, and any new additions to the GL would be copied here automatically as well. We also have report collections at the bottom. It's a quick way to group a set of reports and have them all generated at one time. So I may have a month-end report collection, my income statements, balance sheet statements, cash flow statements, all in one report collection. I'll have them all generated at the same time. So an easy way to have those and not have to individually run all those separate reports. Now, when you're setting up all the reports and budgets inside Prospero, you can add as many as you need to. A quick way to see what you have for all your report definitions is if I go to the home button at the top left, I have an option for catalog view. I'll click that icon there on the ribbon, and this will open up a list of all the report definitions we've set up inside Prospero. And it'll show me in the different columns all the report IDs and descriptions, all the lines that are associated with those reports, and the columns, when it was created, who did that, and all the details. So it's a one page here, easy to see what we've set up for all the different definitions. And it's a great way to also make a backup copy of all these definitions. You've got the export button at the bottom here, and then I'll just export those definitions out to an external file. Quick and easy way to make up a backup copy of those report definitions. Now I'll close this window here for us, and the last thing we'll talk about is our quick launch window here. All these large colorful buttons, easy way for us to organize any of the reports or the input screens that we need to have handy. And just one click will run those reports for us and open up the screen. Nick is going to walk us through all that stuff. This quick launch window is customizable for every user that we've got. They can just go to My Quick Launch, and they can pick out which reports they want to have handy, which input screens they want to have handy, and any collections they want to have handy. So a great, easy way to keep those right on your quick launch, easy to run those with one click. So I'm going to hand this over to Nick Sercer, and Nick's going to give us a tour of the financial reporting inside Prospero, and then I'll come back after him and do the budgeting for us. Nick, if you're ready, I'll let you go ahead and make yourself presenter.
Hey Noah, Nick here. I'm afraid I'm having technical problems. My internet is down.
Okay.
So I cannot launch Prospero. I do have audio with you though.
Okay, so no problem. What I'll do then is I'm going to jump into budgeting. Nick, maybe while I'm doing that, your internet will come back up, and if not, I'll handle reporting as well. Okay. So I'm going to jump over and look at budgeting with you on my screen. I'm going to log into a different window of Prospero. I'm not going to log in as an administrator. I'm just going to be logged in as a manager. So let me switch screens with you. All right, so I've got on my screen a new window of Prospero. I'm logged in as a manager. I know that because of the bottom left, I can see MGR1. That's a manager I've set up for budgeting inside Prospero. I don't have access to all those different buttons that I saw that I just ran through with you as an administrator. And I'm just looking at the quick launch for this individual user. Let me start us off with looking at our budget input screen for this user. So I've got a button here, budget input. I'll click that one time. Prospero will prompt me for what I want to or budget for. I can see that I've got options for company, location, and department. If you look at company, I can budget for any of our three companies, US, Europe, or Canada. I can budget for any of our different departments. I've got access to all of those. But when I look at location, I've only got Denver services available. All right, so I've set up security for the budget, and this also controls security for any reports that this user would have access to. So I only have access to the Denver services location. All right, let's open this input screen for us. And a little bit about the layout for our budget input screen here. This is spreadsheet style user interface, easy for people to go from Excel budgeting to budgeting here in Prospero. Same thing from going from Forecaster to Prospero. It's rows and columns. I've got 3 tabs across the top. I'm looking at the main tab, but I also have a input screen for human resources and one for capital. And we'll look at those 2 tabs in just a minute. We'll cover the main tab first. Now in the main tab, I've got months going across the top of the page here, year to date on the right, and I've got a list of account numbers down the left-hand side. There's a lot of shading on the different rows here. The gray rows are locked from input, so they're either calculations that the budget administrator has set up ahead of time, or they're coming from those other 2 tabs for human resources and capital, like the salary section. All these accounts for salaries are coming from the human resources tab. So I can't change those balances directly on the screen. Now the rows that I do have available for input are displayed here in white. So I know that those are available for input for me. When you set up your input screens back at your office, you control all the shading, the colors for the font sizes, all the calculations, all the detail you control. You can have as few rows here as you need to for accounts. Instead of monthly, if you need quarterly or year-to-date totals, you control all that as a budget administrator. Data input, really easy inside these input screens for us. Just type in the balances. Anytime those are involved in other calculations, the other calculations update those rows immediately, or other columns like year to date. We can copy and paste like you do in Excel. Just spread that $1,200 to all the future months for us. If your budget managers need to add more details other than just typing in balances, then we typically use line item details. So I'm going to go down a little bit further down to the advertising row, and we'll use that account as an example for line item details. So for advertising, I can see that we've already got some rows of line item details added to this account. And I know that because on the left-hand side, I've got a plus icon next to that row. If I click that plus icon, it opens up that row and shows me 3 rows of line item details in green that have been added to that advertising account already. I've got one for print publications, online ads, and radio. Now your budget managers, they can add as many rows of line item details without having to call the budget administrator for help. They can do it themselves. They'll just right click and select insert line item. They'll add as many rows here as they need to. They can change the label. I'll just say this is going to be television. And then they type in the balances they need. And let's just copy that and spread it to all the monthly columns to the right. So easy for them to add that level of detail. And you see right away the budget for television is going to be added in the advertising account. It doesn't mess up your consolidations because the consolidation is all based on the account numbers, which will be account 7350 for advertising. Now while I'm here, I also want to mention adding notes to any of your rows here. I can see that there's already some notes added for some of these rows, and I know that because on the left-hand side I've got 3 blue boxes on the left-hand margin, so that I know that those 3 rows have got notes already added to them. So if I have my cursor, I can just hover over the blue box, the text pops up, shows me what notes were added. There's also a panel on the right-hand side that says annotations. That'll scroll out from the right, and they'll show me the note for the row that I've got my cursor on. It'll show me the user that added it and the date and time it was added. And you can add as many notes to this row as you need to, make any changes or delete these with the buttons at the bottom. So another great way for your budget managers to add additional notes for you in the budget process. Now, as your budget managers go through the process of doing their budgets, They may come to the screen many times and make changes and everything and save those changes. And they may forget that they make some changes. Don't worry, we track history for every row in your budget input screens here. So if I just put my cursor on any of these rows, I'll click on advertising here. I've got a button at the top right for history. I'll click that, and this will show me any changes that have been made to this account. I can see what user made the changes, the date and time the changes were made, and the balances that were changed. So an easy way to keep track of that for everybody throughout the entire budget process, tracking history for any account changes or line item detail changes for any of these input screens. So it's a high-level overview of our main input screen for Prospero. Let's look next at the two optional tabs. We've got the tabs for human resources and capital. Those are optional tabs, but they do come in handy for breaking down the details and helping you with your budget balances. Now, the human resource section would be used to populate all of our accounts that relate to human resources, our wages, taxes, and benefits. I can see those in the salary section and the benefits section. All these account balances that are posted to these accounts would come from the details from that human resources tab. And if I switch to that tab, I can see that at the very top of the page here, this is for the same combination of segments that I started with on the main input screen, the U.S. company, Denver Services, Location Administration Department. These are all the employees I would have imported from my payroll system into Prospero. It's an easy import. We just pull that data in from an Excel spreadsheet into Prospero. We pull in employee IDs, names, hire dates. They're going to start in what period they're going to end working for us, pay rates, either as hourly pay rates or salaried pay rates. You'll see our salary grades denote that as well, salaried versus hourly. This page tracks pay changes. You may have pay increases or decreases for next year. We can track bonus payouts for next year. And as I scroll to the right, we can also do overtime. We can handle commissions. We also have the benefit filters here. I've got two columns, one for state and one for health. These benefit columns help us break out different rates to calculate our benefit dollars. I can see that all the employees here are in Colorado, so they qualify for the Colorado state tax rates. We've broken out the health insurance from between family and single, so we have different rates based on those qualifications. We only have two extra columns here for benefits, but you can add more. If you needed more than just state and health, we can add more benefit columns to help break out rates for different purposes. Now, this human resource tab is an optional tab. You don't have to use it, but it does come in handy. And if you do set it up, not everybody will even see this tab. So you control who should see the human resources tab, so that if you have a budget manager who should not budget for HR details, they won't even see this tab. Same kind of concept applies for the capital tab. The capital tab will be used for budgeting any new assets for next year. We've already got several that have been added here. Your budget manager would add these rows, type in their descriptions, figure out what type of asset they will be, when they plan to purchase these assets, when to start depreciation expense, how many of these assets they're going to purchase, and the individual cost of these assets. And then all the details on this page will book the cost to the capital accounts and the depreciation expense to the depreciation expense accounts. And we do have those listed back on the main input screen. So if I go back to main and scroll down a little bit, I have a section for all of our capital expenses. So I can see the capital cost accounts listed and depreciation expense as well. Again, capital, just like human resources, is an optional tab, but it does come in handy to help break down the details for asset costs and depreciation expense. and you control which users should even have access to this tab. So 3 input screens we've got set up here for your budget input: the main account input page, human resources, and capital. A great way to help your budget managers. Again, as soon as they make changes here and click the save button on their input screen, all that data goes into a single SQL database for Prospero, and it's all consolidated right away and available for reporting. So speaking of reporting, let me switch over to my administrator window. I'll show you a report and a chart and graph to show us our budget data at a high level, and then I'll switch over to Nick if he's back online with us. All right, so I have switched windows back to my administrator's window for Prospero. Just want to show you one report and one graph report we've put together here. If I go to, on my quick launch window, budgeted income statement, Prospero is going to ask me what do I want to run this report for. I'm going to pick company 1, which is our US company. I'll pick all locations and all departments. This will give me right away the consolidated totals for my whole company for the US. All locations, all departments. I can double click and drill down on these details. That's a great way to see this. I can run this report for any location, any department, or any of the companies as well. And again, this consolidated report is consolidated and available as soon as my budget managers click the save button on input. Now, another report we have set up for looking at our budget data. Back to the quick launch tab, I've got one at the bottom here for revenue and expenses original budget. This is a bar chart we've set up, so I'll click this, have this open up for us. A quick way for us to look at our revenue, which are the blue rows here, compared to our expenses every month. And expenses would be the red bars here. And these charts and graphs that you build to analyze your data, these are dynamic, so you can double click and drill down any part of these charts and graphs. So if I double click on the revenue, and if I double click on any of the bars of revenue, it double clicks on revenue for all the months. I can see that this is going to drill down through the accounts. Like so on the right hand side, sales, returns, and discounts. But it's easy to switch that. So if I want to not drill down by account, I can switch the drill down order and drill down by, say, location. So let me close this tab. And I'm going to go to the top. I have a ribbon option that says change drill down order. And instead of drilling down through the natural first, let me just take location and move that to the top. And now if I double click on revenue, I'm drilling down through my locations. I can see that on the bar on the right: Miami services, San Francisco services, San Francisco sales, and Denver services, which has the majority of my revenue. So
no, I'm here. I was waiting for you to you said you were going to do one more thing, and then you went into my part. I should have spoken up earlier. I guess.
That's okay. I was just wrapping up my budgeting piece, and then I am going to switch back to you for the reporting piece.
Okay.
Yep. So just wrapping it. In fact, this is the last screen I had for us before we switch over to Nick's screen there. Just to show you the drill down on that budget data. I've changed the drill down order to see how those balances are being entered into the budget. And that is the high-level overview of Prospero budgeting for us. We looked at the input screens, and we just here looked at the reporting on that budget data in the numeric layout and the drill down for the charts and graphs here. So Nick, if you are ready, yeah, let's switch over to your screen. I'll let you show them the more of the reporting and the other features for reporting inside Prospero.
Okay, that sounds great. No, thanks.
Yep, I'll make you presenter.
Okay, thank you, Noah. I appreciate it. Wanted to show everybody a little more exploratory of the reporting. Going to cover some of the same things Noah already touched upon, and maybe give a little more information. First of all, let me everyone note that my screen looks a bit different on my quick launch than NOAA, and it's personalized and customizable based on the user. So anything that's important to you or you want to have specific access to and quick access, you can designate on the quick launch, and it's very easy to do. We just change the settings for quick launch. This is related to how it's going to appear, and then my quick launch right next to it allows us to select which reports, collections, or input definitions that we want to define within our quick launch. So you can see it has a little bit different look. You can change the coloring and the size, the approach that it goes on. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to pull up one of my reports, and I'm going to be going through this in several different iterations so that we can see how the report can behave and how we have multiple options. So when I launch this report, I have, I'm prompting for, I've predefined the company, though I have allowed it to change. I'm going to put it on, leave it on 1, and then I'm going to select the defaults for location and department. So I'm prompting for all 3 of those, and I have a few other prompts that we'll get into in a moment. But all of these things can be changed at the time that you generate the report. And that's, we're going to find out that that's not only for the live reports like this one that we're running, but also for any published reports. So when I drill in, then when I launch the report, then we can see the very latest information. This is updated with all the latest changes, and you can see that this report includes budget data. So any changes that NOAA might have made in the last few minutes are going to be reflected in this report. So let me show you, first of all, a couple of things. Now, we can see our report output, and we have complete drill down capabilities like NOAA saw, and I'll show some examples of that. First, let me show you how we can do the charting in these reports. I'm just going to select Display Chart from my toolbar, and then you can see our options as far as the chart. You have a few things that allow you to change the orientation. And as NOAA had pointed out, we have full capabilities to drill into any part of this. So if I've got 32.3% of in the San Francisco region, then it's going to drill down, and we can further drill down. So by doing that, it allows me to change the options any way that I would like. Okay, so I can make it so that it's going to work for me perfectly. I'm going to close those graphs now. I will show you quickly, all of the ones for this report are the pie graphs, but just as a quick example, let me show you another one that I pulled up previously that just shows some examples, some of the other kinds of graphs that we can include in our reporting. And all of these have the same kind of capabilities in terms of drill down, et cetera, depending on the way that the report was designed. So just to give you a view of that. So now then I'm going to go back, and I'm going to open up my report, and I'm going to select one of these to drill in. So I'll pick exempt salaries. I'm going to drill into exempt salaries, and that's going to show me my salary breakdown for all of my locations. Okay, so we see Miami Services, San Francisco, and Denver, et cetera. Now I can drill into any of these parts, and you can see now it goes into our next segment, which is our department. So we see marketing here and sales. Let's drill into sales, and that's going to take us down to the transaction level detail. So by doing that, we can see all levels, and incidentally, you can go to the chart from any of these levels that you would like just by selecting Display as Chart. So it will take you into the chart at the same level that you've drilled to in this particular report. So in looking at this output, and I'm just going to close the tabs to come back to my original report, I want to relaunch this report, and I want to show you a few other examples. There's a lot of stuff that we can do with these reports that really allow us to take one report and we can push it out to multiple different people, and depending on their needs, they can customize it themselves to be able to see the data in a lot of different ways. So for example, and NOAA touched upon this, I'm going to reopen the report using my shortcut on the toolbar, and instead of just selecting all location and all department, remember that those are our full-time trees that always are going to represent every location and every department is defined either in Prospero or in your general ledger. so you can always select all and know that it has everything included. But what if I wanted to select another one of the trees? And Noah had talked about the trees for a moment, and you see we've got a couple of these for locations that we've created. The total company by division, and you can see as we expand that, you see more options. There's a total company by region. So these are representing the same data that we got for all locations because we have all of our location IDs defined within these trees, but they add additional levels. So they allow us a different way to select our data. So I'm going to pick my total company by division and select OK without making any other changes. My drill down method is the report tree. So I left the department at all. And as I drill in, when we compare the two, they're very much the same. But if I come down to my exempt salaries and drill in now, then it's going to follow the way that it was designated. So this is my company by division. So I see my breakdown immediately by sales and services, and I could drill into services, and it's going to take me into the next level of the location. So breaking down that division further, Denver and San Francisco, and then we can of course go in, and next it's going to break it down by our next segment, which is department, and then we could go further beyond that to take us down into the transaction level detail. So I'm going to close those as we go, and I'll leave the main one up again. Actually, so I'm going to reopen that report one more time so that we can see. This time I'm going to select the other option, total company by region, just so we can see how it's going to impact our drill down. So it's very easy. I'm doing this active, so it's a live report we're viewing. And so see now when I drill into that first level into my exempt salaries, then I can see the breakdown by region. So I have Southwest, Midwest, and then I can drill into the Midwest, and then I'll be able to see my further detail. So these are all my 4,000 range, take us into Denver services, and then into back into our departmental breakdown. So what if a user or somebody who's viewing this report is not so interested in the location? They're a departmental manager, for example, and want to see how that is going to impact them in that regard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to relaunch this report, and I'm going to make a change. And actually, I'm going to just go over here and launch it from this location here because it's going to select the same thing for me. So I'm going to go to my favorable, unfavorable. Now this is still a live run. So if I run this report, and I pulled this up so that I can also show that definition. I'm going to go back to all location and all departments, but I'm going to change my drill down method. And in this case, it doesn't even matter which order that we had selected or which prompts that we had selected. So if I change that from the tree order to account level, then it's going to overlook my the trees that are used. So what happens now when I generate the report is the output is going to again look the same, but when I drill in, and I'll pick my same guy, it's right there. Somehow it was getting away from me. And now what I can see is it's going directly to the account level breakdown. So if I choose to show the hidden columns, I've got a column in there that's going to show me my account, my fully qualified account, so I can see the full length of these guys. So I have multiple different options. Now I mentioned about the departmental manager, and as they are viewing the report, we can change our drill order. So we'll move our department up one. Come on now. And now I'll run this report. So this one, I will leave it, go back to the reporting tree. I'm going to drill in or launch the report, and now I'll drill in to see a completely different view. So we've seen about 6 different views of this exact same report, all from the same data. So let's select the same one we did before, exempt salaries. And now you can see that it's broken down first by my departments, and then we can drill into the additional data. So now it's going to go through the locations and then on to my transaction level detail. So quite a few options there. And there actually are some other things that we can do that are pretty cool with that. But wanted to point out that we have a lot of different options, a lot of things that you can do with this data. All right. So one other thing I do want to point out, well, I'll do that in a moment when I'm looking at the published reports. So let's take a look at this breakdown. Let's look at this report and see a little more of what's happening behind the scenes. So if I look at the design for this report, you can see that it's identifying the building blocks that I'm using. So remember, these are interchangeable. So I may be using this line definition in multiple different places. As a matter of fact, if I want to display that, I can always go to my lines. Let's see, and we've got one for our reports. If I select the input, then I can select where used. It's going to show me any place that that report is being used. These are all being used for input, but they could also be used for reporting. So you always have that option. And Noah showed how you can show the catalog of the full list. That's going to give you that those combinations as well. Let's take a quick look into the line definition. So this is the line definitions defined for this report, and there are a few things that I want to highlight. First of all, we've been looking at this report. Obviously, there are more rows shown in the report than we have lines on our line definition. And that is mainly because we are using a feature from Prospero, fantastic feature that allows us to expand from our summary rows in our line definition to show the detail beneath it. So we don't have to do the drill down to get to that data. We could turn it off and show it just as a summary, but you can see that we've used on net revenue that we actually have defined a range right in the line definition, but we're also using, such as for COGS or expenses, we're using the trees that Noah pointed out for our for our account level segment. So these are ways with TNet, then we have all options along this tree that are going to break down all of the different accounts for each of them. So then we can use these in our reporting. You saw with the locations, we can use those with our as our prompts, and that's going to allow us to, again, be very specific, and it saves us a lot of maintenance, because as we update our trees, then any reports using, for example, our total expenses is automatically going to be included in this report. So all of that will be reflected. So what you see here is that we're using the expanded line to allow that. So that's how, when we look at our total expenses and put it as one row, then we can see that in our report as multiple rows because it's represented by multiple different accounts. Okay, so let's then take a look at the columns real quickly, and then we're going to go into our published. So for our columns, and for any of you that are familiar with Management Reporter or FRX for that matter, Noah had pointed out that we have worked with those products for many years and other products also, and we've kind of combined all of the things that we like about those products, all the most useful features, into Prospero. So a lot of this is going to be something that looks familiar to you. In particular, for each of these columns, we've identified, for example, columns C, D, and E as data columns. So these are pulling data, or balance columns we call them, pulling data directly from the general ledger or from our data mart in the case of your budget data, and we can select the book code that's defined, and you can see any book codes that are defined within your general ledger are going to be visible here. Also, any book codes get defined specifically in Prospero. We can have as many different budget versions as you would like, all represented by book code here. So by selecting that, that's going to identify the source of the data that comes in, and then we can further go into making it more specific as to what we want. You can see that we have year and period defined here, and what that's doing is making our reports dynamic. As accountants, we run the same reports month after month, The last thing we want is to have a report that requires us to come and update it every month so that it's going to reflect a new period. Instead, when we use the term year and period, then it's just going to our report date. These reports that I've been running as of July 2019, 2019 becomes the year and July becomes the period. As I change my report date to August and September as my calendar moves along in the year, then these will automatically update to do that. And you can see when we're showing the prior year that we reference the columns as they relate to one another. So year minus 1 would be 2019 minus 1, so that's going to give us the prior year data. And then we have some calculated columns that are allowing us to show our variances. And since we're using the, in this case, the variances are defined in such a way that we can see it as a favorable versus unfavorable. So Prospero will take into account whether a balance should normally be a debit or a credit, so we can recognize that if our budgeted expenses are higher than our actuals, then that's a positive variance. If our budgeted revenue is higher than our actuals, then that is a negative, and it will be reflected as such. All right. So quite a few other things on here. I can't go into all of those, but for example, we have date filter. Date filter would allow us to break down this data to a smaller level beyond just by period. And for that matter, we can also identify within these columns to show multiple periods within a single column. But the date filter will look at our transactions and it will allow us to either put a date range, a specific date, or identify the days of the month that are going to be included. So if we need to do reports that are going to reflect weekly balances or daily balances, then we can also do that. Other things we can do is we have a very robust system of suppressing, so we can suppress columns that are not showing values, for example, and we also have a few other options related to that. It's very easy to do a vertical line across or up and down on a report using the column definition, and we have quite a few other options that we can select. All right, and like our line definitions, we can see a preview of what the data looks like or will look like, so you are not having to regenerate the report many times to see how your changes are going to impact it. And we can also turn that off in case you're not interested in looking at that. Now, one other thing that's not immediately noticeable is that if we look at the properties, we can see that our layout includes company, natural, location. These are all of our segments as defined, and we're defining specifically period. But if we want to filter a column so that it's going to show a particular department, for example, then we can also include this in here. And this allows us to select that department. I'll show you a quick example of, oh, actually, no, that I don't have that. All right, so I won't save any changes to that, but an example would be a report that included columns to identify our departments, for example. And one of our graphs is representing that. Okay, a few of these other things here. Noah had touched on the overrides. That's primarily for budgeting that would allow, based on the department or location that you're selecting, which row definition that it's going to use to show the appropriate accounts. We can adjust our headers and footers. We can make modifications in terms of how do we want charts to appear, if we even want to allow charts for this particular report, what types of charts, and you saw a few different examples of those. This is our output, where for the report as it's being output, do we want to send it directly to the workspace, which has been the examples we've done, but also we can send it out to directly to the printer, we can send it out to Excel or PDF, or to a published report. So we can set that so that it's automatically going to publish as soon as we generate that report in similar manner to what Management Reporter does, but without the option to turn that off. Okay, and then of course some page layout options. So now then, just a couple of other things that we haven't touched on. I had mentioned published reports a few times. Before I do that, I want to go to report collections. So report collections, as we go through the month, usually the folks in accounting, some of the finance people are going to be using these reports on a regular basis, always looking at updates, looking at how changes in the general ledger are going to be impacted on the financials, getting ready for the close at the end of the month. But you have a whole lot of other people that you want to see these financials that are not interested in seeing every version. So to facilitate that, one of the things that we can do is create report collections. So if I open up a report collection, and this is the one called month end, then we can see that as we that we can define to have as many reports as we want in any order that we want them to be generated, and we can generate all of those at once by applying a single report date to them. We can also have the option to go back to the defaults as defined, including the date for each of the reports. So in this case, our output is our published reports. So this is specifically why I wanted to bring this up, that we can run this report collection at the time that we've finalized our financials, and we can then have that accessible to the rest of our staff. So for folks that can don't have or not generating reports themselves, they can come into the published reports, and we've sent this out to the July 2019 folder. So if I open that, then I can see all of those reports. These are the published versions of them. If we have multiples in there, then they'll be broken down and time-stamped, and we can select these. If I go back to my favorable, unfavorable, I can open that report. Again, I have all of the same options that I had. So when we publish the reports, it not only publishes what you see as part of the report, it publishes all of the data. So any end user, even if they don't have access to the report design, can make those changes in terms of choosing different prompts, switching to graphs, choosing different drill order. All of those are options that the users have. So when I launch this report, it's going to look just like the report that I had. The difference is going to be that this is a static version. So this is not an active one that we've just generated. This is one that was already set to be the final version. So then that one's the one that's available. If there are any changes and you need to replace that, it's quite easy to delete any published reports and replace those with a later version. Also, when you select your reports, if you run the report from the top level, or if you have it identified in your quick launch, then it's going to automatically pull up the very latest published version of that report. Now note down here that I have on the rent row that there is a little blue square. So that's identifying that I have an annotation for this particular row. So if I highlight the row, then I can see the annotations just by expanding it over to the right, an anticipated rent increase. Because what we can see is we budgeted for around 9,000. Prior year was 10,000, but somehow this year it's gone to 12. So there may be an explanation for that. So that's what the annotation is for. We have a similar situation here in supplies. Notice how the supplies is 23,000, and notice how the supplies is 23,000, but we had only did $700 last year, and we only budgeted about 6,000. So if we wanted to add another annotation here, I'm just going to right-click, annotate, multi-year purchase at discount, for example. So now we have that annotation is added on there, and as we have multiple annotations on the line, they're all going to be visible here with a date and time stamp and who done it. So anyone viewing this published report now is able to see those annotations. So it's very useful for explaining those kinds of one-off differences. It's going to save people a lot of time having to look all of that information up. So we wanted to leave a couple of minutes for Q&A, and Noah has a couple of additional remarks. So I'm going to hand it back over to him, and then take any questions.
All right, thanks, Nick. Great show there for us. Appreciate that. I'll switch over to my screen. And yep, I just have really just a short discussion and a couple slides before we close out the video today. You've had a high-level overview of Prospero for reporting and for budgeting. A lot of great features inside Prospero to help you with your financial statements, your budgeting, your forecasting, your planning, and all the details that go into setting those up. If you have questions about Prospero, feel free to email either Nick or I. I've got the last screen on my screen here. What's next? Um, email us. Email us for a private demo. You've got my email address, noah.moseley@msxgroup.com, or nick.sercer@msxgroup.com. With a private demo, we can answer all of your questions about your particular ERP system, your chart of accounts, your budget requirements, any migration options you need. So if you are using Management Reporter or FRX or Forecaster, we can talk to you about the migration options for copying your reports and budget setup from those systems over to Prospero. Plus, we can also set you up with a free 30-day trial site for Prospero. So that's a great option for you to have hands-on with the product using your own chart of accounts and your data. So let us know. We'll be glad to talk to you about those options. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We will look forward to working with you in the future. Until then, have a great day.